Welcome to the Impulse Spotlight, a podcast for product development professionals. In this episode, we speak with a senior new product development engineer from Ambu, a Denmark-based medical device company specializing in devices for use in anesthetic procedures. Born in southern Indiana, he attended the University of Evansville, where he excelled both academically and athletically, running Division I cross country while earning a BS in mechanical engineering with a minor in math. Today, he resides in Indianapolis with his wife and 2 children, spending his free time involved with the local running community and working as an assistant coach for a nearby high school. Sam Mires has been with Ambu for 4 years, working at the forefront of numerous successful product launches, and has a keen insight into the challenges of developing medical devices in a highly regulated industry. In today's episode, we explore the development of Ambu's viral bacteria filter, a device designed to enhance patient safety during respiratory use. We discuss the details of the development process and look into the technical aspects of the project, such as injection mold tooling, process validation, and the importance of cross-functional teamwork. Furthermore, Sam provides insight into the importance of understanding customer needs, the push for sustainable product development, and the trends shaping the future of the medical device industry. Join us as we explore Sam's journey within product development and the lessons he's learned along the way. Let's get into it. Hey, Sam, welcome to the show.
Hi, Troy. Thanks for having me.
I'm glad you're here. So I started in the product development world almost 29 years ago. Worked for a company called Compression Engineering. Learned all facets of product development, SLA prototyping, all that stuff was brand new. Saw the writing on the wall after about 3 years of that, and I started Impulse about 25 years ago. So how did you get into product development?
So I started in product development probably early in high school, more of getting a feel for how things were designed. I mean, I was that kid that took things apart. I took pins apart, all kinds of stuff apart, see how it worked. Problem was usually putting them back together. But I started just kind of tinkering with things, just playing around with, as a kid. And then as I got into high school, got really excited about drafting, actual technical illustration and how you can, design things in 2D space in order to have something, in the real world. And then from there, I was easily geared into, actual development classes and things like that, which led me to going to the University of Evansville to study mechanical engineering. So there, I was able to take more product development classes and kind of get more of a feel for it. I was fortunate enough to be part of a class that was able to do a lot of on-site, hands-on development with local companies. I did a course with a few of my colleagues where we prepared with business students to develop a business plan, come up with a development pitch, and actually give that to the company to see if it was going to, be brought to fruition and things like that. So really got to see a little bit more of, okay, here's all the stuff you learn in school, but like, how does it actually apply? And if you don't want to go into get your PhD in, nuclear physics, what could you do with your engineering degree? So, and, I've always been drawn to just kind of, you go to the store, you pick something up, how does that get there? So, I went to school at University of Evansville, studied mechanical engineering, and I, was able to get hooked up with a sporting goods company while I was down there and worked with other designers and kind of got more of a feel for, this is product development. This is all it takes. And that really kind of turned my focus onto, post-college. My career's been in product development, anything from fork truck design and things like that to lighting and residential illumination to safety restraints, and then to where I am today in med device. So it's taken me a lot of different places, and really just kind of seeing how the concept gets all the way from an idea all the way to the end customer.
Very cool. You mentioned you're in medical devices now. So what's your current role and what kind of devices do you develop?
Yeah, so I work for a company called Ambu. It is a Denmark-based med device company. We are known for our single-use products, which or used for generally the role that I'm in as a senior new product development engineer. is our site does design for devices that are used for anesthesia procedures. So any type of surgery that you'll be put under with anesthetic gas, our company will design the equipment, or not the equipment, I'm sorry, the products that will support that. So breathing bags, filters, anesthetic gas tubing for breathing circuits, things like that. And my role is to work with our rest of our company to come up with new concepts, innovate on current designs and improve, whether that's from like a cost perspective or just an end ease of use perspective. And the role it's we're tied to a manufacturing plant here in Noblesville, so that's a nice thing that's been really cool about the role that I'm in now, is that I'm able to work directly with the facility so I can see how it's being used and kind of keep those customers in mind. But it's all here in central Indiana, so we're able to design, we're able to build, and my role really is to work with all those different cross-functional key members to bring a product to market or improve a product, and ultimately deliver something that's going to be used in a surgery setting, and be there to support someone's livelihood.
Cool. And what's the product you want to talk about today?
So the product I would like to talk about today is our it's our ViroBac 2 viral bacterial filter, particularly our exhalation filter. This is a product, and I actually have one here. So this is the product itself. This is a viral bacterial filter that's used. Really, it's I just kind of have the exact blurb that I'd like to kind of give just to make sure I get all the words right. So it's a viral bacterial filter that's indicated for use when the care provider decides to protect against the transference of virus or bacteria during respiratory use. Which that's our intended use statement. And really what that boils down to is when a clinician or someone is using a device to either ventilate a patient or provide respiratory care, this filter will actually protect upon the exhalation, so exhaled gas from the patient or the exhaled air from the patient. So if the patient is being treated in something that's really still pretty raw with everyone's minds is like during COVID, if you're dealing in a clinical setting and you're working on a patient that you may not know if they have some sort of a condition that's undisclosed, that air that's being exhaled is being captured by the filter media to kind of protect from the spread of that disease. So it helps with viral bacterial filtration. And it's something that it was one of the first projects that I started here at Ambu back in 2020. And yeah, that's what I'd like to talk about today.
Cool. Tell us more about it. Like, what are some of the key features or innovations or some things people won't know just by looking at it?
Yeah. So, I mean, one thing, and again, this is my first foray into med device. So I've been with Ambu for almost 4 years now. And as opposed to some of the other industries that I've been a part of, everything really kind of comes down to certain standards for either connectivity or the way things need to be assembled, so that when a clinical person is being able to support a patient, they know that their connections are going to fit to, either standard dimensions or provide, a certain level of care. What is interesting about this particular device is more kind of how it came about. This came about really at the height of COVID. These types of filters, exhalation filters, exist, but what makes this unique is kind of how this one came around from our facility itself. We have other viral bacterial filters for our circuits. So those are used for like an anesthetic setting. So if a patient is being treated with anesthetic gas, it may be attached to a mask or a filter, and that's in more of a clinical setting. But in the case where COVID really put a damper on how many ventilators and systems like that were available to clinicians, this was able to be used with a resuscitator to kind of help with the keeping people ventilated. So this attaches to a resuscitator. It has ability to, and that's all based and driven on the standard connections itself. but it was able to take the technology that we've been employing with our breathing circuits and kind of bring it to a different product line to enable the support for that. So again, it's something that came about during the peak of the pandemic. So trying to adapt, we had been making filters for breathing circuits, and then there was this shift. And then I came in being new to all of this. So it was a lot of trial by fire, and working remote and working, with a lot of really talented colleagues. And, that's where this device came from. So it was a big effort from our site and our company as a whole, both local and global, to bring this about.
Very cool. So we've literally helped design thousands of products, and every one of those journeys is different. So walk us through kind of the journey of developing this, and like what were the steps involved?
Yeah. So typically with a product like this, we'll work with our, it's typically, working closely with our sales and marketing, and then people that have customer interface to see what is the market really needing, what is next that we should be innovating on. And I joined in roughly after that point where, there was already discussions with our sales team, marketing, of what the next project needed to be. Typically with a project like this, and this one in particular, we knew we knew what we wanted to design, and we knew kind of what we wanted it to attach to. We knew there were constraints based on standards and connections and things like that, and ISO standards. So we pretty much kind of worked together as a large cross-functional team, and then kind of developed this particular plan. So we have our initial plan of this is what our goal is. This is what we, want to achieve, in this general timeline. And then we kind of developed more of a local plan based on our different activities, from a quality perspective, development perspective, validation perspective. And all of those ideas end up coming together in our general plan that we would meet regularly throughout the project as we had an overarching timeline of key deliverables. So it's something that's fairly common within the industry, of having like an overarching timeline with key deliverables to kind of check in and make sure you're meeting the progress. What made this a little bit unique, at least at the time, I think it's more commonplace now, is just having a mix of remote, local, and people kind of all over the place having an input with this. So we are a global company, so we do work, with people in Denmark or in China or wherever our facilities are. But having a little bit more of that mix locally too, where we had people both working remotely from home, and then people within the facility to work with our production or manufacturing team to help do more of like the tooling side of the project. That was something that was a bit of a challenge. But I think we found, and what, like I said, the talented group that we've worked with really know kind of where our strengths are, and are able to kind of come along and jump in where those needs are. So we were able to kind of pull together and really be able to deliver on each of those deliverables while still, being able to meet our timeline. Med device is, it is, as it should be, it's highly scrutinized, right? Like quality. I mean, it's a medical device, right? There's no cutting corners, right? You have to do it right, and you want to do it right because it's something that's impacting people's lives. So the fact that we were able to meet that timeline in, you'd say, more of a not ideal situation where there's remote work, there's a little bit of a lag between check-ins and things like that. Being able to kind of find those strengths and still deliver a high quality product is something that we're pretty proud of.
Yeah, that's awesome. What was the timeline? What did that look like?
So the timeline itself was, it I guess, more or less the timeline, kind of hard, the best way to describe it. Different groups particularly will have different aspects that they bring in that have their own general lead times or assumptions of how long things will take. So the total development, took quite a while, I think, from start to launch. I believe it was a little over a year or so, to kind of get everything fully developed from the concept to actually out the door kind of development. But there were a few changes here and there throughout the timeline, depending upon, um, just normal pitfalls like local holidays, things like that, time where production shut down, for certain reasons or, municipality reasons. But the timeline itself was about a year or so, and that included again the paperwork, which as I was new to the med device, there's a lot of paperwork, and I don't mind that, which is kind of strange for a development engineer, I think. But lots of paperwork up front, and then really getting into the design, and then confirming that design and our validation of our assembly process and our manufacturing process, because we have all of that on site. And then again, tying all that stuff together at the end with all of the appropriate quality and regulatory documentation.
Did that include building new injection mold tools, or were those pieces already existing?
Yeah, it did. So that's one thing that's really cool about our site here. I've always worked with more of stampings and sheet metal fabrication and things like that. In the lighting world, that's your bread and butter. It's all metal. So this was my first time with injection mold and tooling, and we actually have a tool manufacturer, or a tool room on site with tool makers, and we make we make injection molding tooling, we manage it, and we maintain it, and we have a full mold room and extrusion room here at Ambu.
Cool.
So that was really cool to kind of see, is we have people that I believe the mold itself, we did have the mold brought in, but then after you get the initial mold made, any sort of modification or, even down to like tweaking of, finishes and things like that, we have people on site. So we got to really get the mold in, start playing around with it, and be able to kind of address some of those initial assumptions that we had or tweaks that we needed to make. So we have a full team here that manages that. So I got to work with some really cool people, seeing how you get something, from, just a couple of pellets, and then you get this, injection molded part. So.
Yeah, pretty cool. You've mentioned the team several times and kind of made reference to several different areas. What did the team look like from start to finish? Like, who was involved? What were their roles?
Yeah, so the team was managed by a development engineer, one of our new product development engineer, a colleague of mine at the time, and he was our point person. But we worked with local, quality assurance engineering team for our documentation and our testing. Again, with making sure that we're producing a high quality product. We worked with several engineers from our regulatory group, both locally and then internationally. So we got to work with both corporate and local. That's the kind of the feel here at our site, is there's a lot of collaboration between corporate and local, and kind of the back and forth and that delicate working between the two. So, we had quality individuals, regulatory individuals, sourcing and procurement for the different materials that we use for the assembly and also the injection molding. And then, again, we had process engineers involved, so setting up the validated processes to make sure that we're producing quality product. And then, the tool makers, and then the CAD CAM engineers that developed the tooling drawings and all of the work that goes into making sure those tools are developed appropriately. And then ultimately from there, working closely with sales and marketing too, to kind of, you make a product and then you want to present it to the market. So I did get to work with some really cool individuals developing some of our artwork for it and things like that. So that was kind of an interesting side to the whole process. So not only doing hours and hours of testing, but then also get to work with, I don't know what we used, Illustrator, something, but just being able to work with those individuals as well. And all that too, again, local and global. So it was I've worked with global colleagues in the past, but it was really cool to, be on an email chain that's essentially the entire globe, people from Europe and China and different parts of Asia. So,
Yeah,
so our
very
team
cool.
was, we have a local team that primarily does the day-to-day aspects, but then we do have our corporate experts that will also provide input and direction as well. So it's a little bit of both.
Cool. I assume passing the regulatory hurdle was a key milestone. Were there any other um, key milestones that or achievements that the team reached during the development?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest achievements and kind of our milestones that are really important is our process validation. So in order to make sure that you have, a quality product before you can really begin, and get your testing through to make sure you're producing a quality product, you need to be able to show that I can produce it and have the capability to make them, routinely, right? So that was a big win for our team was when we were able to meet all of our process qualification and we completed that. So it starts from making sure your initial setup of your tooling and making sure everything fits correctly, and all the way from like an installation of making sure all your equipment is installed, but then moving all the way down to like, okay, I want to run this part, here are our parameters, I need to make sure that I can make this part consistently. So when we were able to pass that and um, you know meet all those requirements there, that was a big win, because then we knew we have a really good product here, um, and then we were able to kind of move forward with the rest of the project.
Yeah,
And then ultimately, that's kind of the gatekeeping role. I mean, for a lot of, I'd say not even just this project, but like anything really in med device as well, is when you
sure.
meet those milestones, you're able to move forward and the project can continue.
Sure. Did you guys do the validation internally, or did you use like third party?
We did it internally. Yep.
Okay.
So we have a great team of manufacturing and process engineers. We do work really well as I know cross-functional team is kind of lost some of its meaning, I think, over the last several years, because it's a cool buzzword, or like it's a word that means a lot but doesn't mean a lot at the same time.
Sure.
But we really do work the way that we run our teams here. We use an adaptation of the Scrum process that's typically used in more of like software development. So when we meet as a team, we'll meet and have a whole bunch of items that we want to complete within a given sprint, so a given couple weeks of time. And it's a real
Mhm.
condensed way of meeting all these different things to move on to the next item and meet our milestones. So when it comes to like validation, I was exposed to all those different processes. So all the validation work, all the protocols, and all the executions that we had to do, something that I was never really exposed to. I got to work with process engineers to kind of see how that process works, what we need to do to make sure we're doing things correctly and appropriately, and see more of kind of an insight to what all these different roles, do on a daily basis. So we have like I said, our internal manufacturing and process engineering team. They own that process, but it was neat to be alongside and support them, and also gain experience, because I think the more experience you gain outside of your own little bubble, you want to unsilo yourself, if unsilo is a word. You want to
No.
get out there. We'll copyright that as unsilo yourself. You want to get out there and kind of see from other perspectives. So that's one of the biggest takeaways I got from the whole project was there's so much more involved than just creating a drawing and then you tell someone to make it. Like it's huge. So
Sure.
that was a pretty
Yeah.
cool thing to see.
Yeah, I can imagine. With all the products we've developed, there's always some kind of hiccup or challenge or something that comes up. What was the biggest challenge you and your team faced developing this?
I think the biggest challenge for this one in particular, I believe, was still kind of more of just like, even though we worked well remotely, I think it was having somewhat of a challenge of a disconnect of who's on site, who's not on site. Um, so a lot of that was overcome really by just strong leadership and delegation. So our project leader, you know, he did a really great job of making sure, like, if so and so is able to come in and do this testing, then so and so can pivot and they can do this, and everyone really was able to kind of come around that idea of, if I'm not physically there, what can I do to support? What can we continually do to push the project along and to meet our goals. And I think just being able to be agile and quickly pivot was a big deal, because that was something that was difficult, because I think at the time I was only in the office a couple times a month, just the situation we were in. But if we had someone on site who's like, hey, while I'm in, I'm gonna be able to get this and this and this done. Can you work on this? And then if something switched and I was in the office, I'm like, well, I'm here, I can test this, this, and this, and then can you handle this? So it really highlighted the ability to be more flexible and to be agile in those situations, which I think we've been able to successfully carry on post-COVID. But at the time, I mean, everyone was trying to figure that out too. But that was probably the biggest challenge, was kind of knowing where everyone was and how could we keep moving along when we physically couldn't be, in the same room.
Yeah. If you could go back and change one thing about developing the product, what would it be?
I think the biggest thing that, if I could go back, I think it would be more on being more hands-on with the validation initially, because I've been part of a lot of projects as of late in the last few years, where I've been more involved with validation and more involved in kind of what that looks like. And I think at the time, I was still more comfortable in my wheelhouse of testing and writing protocols and things like that, from like more of a verification side, which is more on the development side. But being more exposed to the process and kind of finding opportunities to support that, I think that's what I would probably go back and do, because I think a lot of questions I had post-project and kind of moving forward would have been clear, had I had more experience and just getting a little bit more of an understanding. I definitely have a much deeper respect for all that kind of, not that I didn't, I obviously respect those, it's a lot of work, but I don't think I quite understood the gravity of like passing your validation. Like, okay, yeah, that's cool, that's a great job, but like really kind of understanding why it was such a big deal, because it does allow you to proceed. I think going back and having a better hands-on experience would be what I'd probably do.
Sure, that makes sense. Just a few more questions before we wrap up, kind of shifting gears away from the product a little bit. What are some of the trends that you see emerging in product development from your perspective?
I think one of the biggest things, especially in med device, and not just in med device, but I've seen it just because of the proximity, is the need for sustainable product development, which I understand kind of comes as an odd statement from someone who works at a single-use, plastic. So, and I get that. And that was my first thing, a little bit kind of like, well, so how does this kind of work? Because obviously we want to be good stewards of the planet and our resources, and how does that help? So, I think we at Ambu and lots of other companies are making that trend to what's the most sustainable way, that we can make our products. Because we still stand by our single-use products, and and it's to prevent transference of any sort of contamination. Like, we think that's an excellent product and the mindset. But to have things made from renewable resources, so alternate plastics, alternate materials, and things like that, just kind of taking that leap into those new materials. I see that happening a lot recently, because a lot of companies are looking at either their carbon footprint, which is something that's been talked about for several years, but then even something as much as, bioplastic, things like that. Where can we capture different materials from? And then how can we be smarter about, how we're producing? So just like looking at it from, I see the trend looking at, the components itself, but then like looking at the full supply chain of kind of like, what are all the inputs that go into making your product, and seeing the full impact of, how can you be a better steward of your resources, and which goes two ways, right? Like, it's being more cost effective in a sense, where if you can be more efficient, then that's going to be better for, the company in general. But it's worthwhile because, we have a limited amount of resources, and, you want to make sure that you can do things responsibly, and kind of putting more onus on the company to really kind of get pushed into that realm. I see that a lot, as the culture is being companies to like, well, we want something that's going to be more planet friendly. And I think that's where the next big thing is, you know, you can make all these great things and it's awesome, but you know, how can we do it in a responsible way?
Sure. Yeah, that makes total sense. Reflecting on the challenges, successes, things that you've encountered in your experience developing products, what words of wisdom would you give somebody looking to make a significant impact in the product development industry?
I think the biggest thing that I've taken from, you know, my relatively green career has been to know your customer. And that doesn't necessarily mean know the consumer. You should know your consumer, don't get me wrong, but know your customer, and that could be your, you know, your next level customer, your production operator, your contractor you're working with to manufacture your things. I think a lot of times, you know, and as rightfully so, you need to know what your consumer wants and understand the market. But if you're designing something that can make it just a percent easier or a percent more comfortable for someone to like actually assemble and take their feedback, you know, if their suggestions, that's why I think it's a, you know, I'm very thankful to work at a manufacturing facility, and I know that's not always the case, but knowing your internal customers, you know, they're going to teach you a lot of you know, how can you improve your processes, how can you improve for design for manufacturing. You can't forget about the person who's going to be physically assembling or building your product. You need to know them, and you need to listen to them, take their advice, you know, and take that into account when you're developing a product. Because if you design the best product out there, but no one can assemble it, or it's a pain to assemble, you know, it's not going to go very far.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Awesome. This has been great. Before we wrap up, is there anything else you want to mention with regards to the product or product development in general?
I just say, like, I just spend some time, you know, for new development engineers. Inspiration comes anywhere. So I like to say there's no dumb ideas or no crazy, you know, random ideas that out there that can't spur on new innovation. So always be looking around and seeing how you can improve. But yeah, that's what I have from product development.
Yeah. Awesome. Before we finish, is there any, can somebody find the product online if they want to learn more about it?
Yeah, you can learn more about us. You can visit ambuusa.com and check out the products that we have. And yeah, that's where you can find it.
All right. I'll put that in the show notes. Awesome. This has been great. Appreciate you doing this, Sam.
No, I appreciate you reaching out. This has been a lot of fun.
To learn more about Impulse and how we might be able to help you, visit impulseproductdevelopment.com.